thanks everybody for joining us today. And it's a pleasure to be here talking about stress, which is something I've been doing for over 30 years now. My company, StressStop, has been producing stress management training materials for all that time. And now we're delivering them online, which we just started doing about 10 years ago, and really kind of focused on that mostly now. And I think, but I didn't hear it with my own ears, that Danica mentioned the fact that you all have access to our web platform, My Stress Tools, which I'm sure she can, if she hasn't already done it, explain to you how to connect up with that. And at the end, I'll show you some resources that are there that I think will kind of bring us back to what we're talking about here. And what I am going to be talking about is, of course, holiday stress and prioritizing the need for stress management in 6 simple steps. Now, this is a model for managing stress that I've developed over the years, partially through an organization called WellCoa. And this model, you can kind of apply it to so many different situations. And this year I thought, well, let's see how it works with holiday stress. So I'll let you all be the judge of how well this 6-step model applies to holiday stress. So here's the model, sort of not necessarily focusing. I mean, this is just the generalized steps of the model. So step 1 is about raising awareness, connecting the dots between your symptoms of stress and your sources of stress. Step 2 is about problem solving or avoiding unnecessary stress. A lot of the stress in our lives can be simply eliminated if we were to approach it from the perspective of problem solving. Step 3 is about cognitive restructuring, changing the way you think during a stressful situation. You'll be surprised, and I hope informed by the end of this program, by how many different ways in which your thinking can kind of sabotage you and cause you a great deal of stress. And then moving on to step 4, that's mindfulness, kind of a buzzword right now. I think everybody hears that word, and they also hear the idea of staying in the present moment. And we'll try to explain, really what is the benefit of staying in the present moment? How can it help you get through the holidays a little bit easier, with a little bit more inner peace? And I think that's what we all want at the holidays. So step 5 is about resilience, and resilience is really my word for self-care. And I think one of the biggest problems with the holidays is we tend to throw the baby out with the bathwater when we're talking about self-care. It's like, oh, I don't have time for it. And so the irony is, just when you need stress management the most, it's when you do it the least. So we have to be aware of that phenomenon, 1, and 2, how can we really keep up with a self-care routine during the holidays? So we'll look at that in step 5. And step 6 is about social support. And I am a great believer in social support. I think it's really your most important weapon against stress. However, at the holidays, social support can kind of, or at least socializing anyway, can be kind of a mixed bag. I think, it's like, do we get together with family? Do we get together with friends? And am I stuck at home because of the pandemic? All kinds of overlays to this step 6 that I normally don't have to deal with in my lectures every other time of the year. But now we'll try to kind of answer some or address some issues around this when we get to step 6. All right, so that's my 6-step model. Here's some definitions of stress. I like to start out with these definitions of stress when I talk about, when I give any lecture, really. And this one is, there are 3 sort of, I think probably the most interesting thing about these definitions is that even the experts don't agree on what is stressful or what the definition of stress is. So we're going to kind of enter into that debate just a little bit right now. So the first definition is the stimulus-based definition, which says stress is caused by outside forces beyond our power to control. And I think most people, this is what they think of when they think of the word stress. They think that, if they're stuck in a traffic jam, or if their boss criticizes their work, that's stressful. You don't have to wonder whether somebody else would be stressed or not by that. Now, Hans Selye came along and he defined stress differently. But before I talk about his definition, I want to talk about this little graphic here called the Social Readjustment Rating Scale. This was kind of a very early stress test. It was developed in the last century, in the 1960s, conducted by two psychologists, Thomas Holmes and Richard Ray, and they gave this to tens of thousands of people. So it's been a validated instrument for sort of determining the effect of stress in people's lives. And maybe you've seen this online, it's been around a long time, but what these two psychologists determined by giving this test to so many people was that if you had so many different events happening in your life, and I'm sure we could put holiday stress on this list, it would probably be low down with a number, but it would be included. And if you look down this list, there are things like marriage that some people find stressful and some people don't. And that's going to suggest the next definition of stress. The point of this scale, and the point of me showing you this scale, is that not everybody agrees on what is stressful. And so we can't necessarily have a stimulus-based definition. But if we could, this would be it. And what these psychologists found that when they gave this test to so many different people was that it was, if you scored 150 or more, in other words, if you had so many different events happening in your life, you were 80% more likely to get sick going forward. So what they did, which was so important, was to connect the dots between sources of stress and stress-related illness. So pretty interesting work that they did. Now, Helen Selye came along a few years after this and said, no, it's not, we can't really agree on what is stressful. It's really your body's response to demands placed on it, because we all think about these things differently. And later in life, he said, it's not so much what happens to you, but how you take it. So that's another way of looking at stress. Now, here's a third way. It was that's known as the transactional definition of stress. And this was developed by a guy named Richard Lazarus, another psychologist. And he said stress is the result of a mismatch between the demands placed on you and your perceived ability to handle those demands. Now, if we were to use the pandemic as an example, a year ago, when I guess a little more than a year ago, March 2020, when the pandemic first arrived on our shores, this was something that we perceived as dangerous. That was our primary appraisal of the threat, right? It could involve harm and loss. This is how we appraise the threat. But it's more than just our appraisal of the threat. It's also, and this is where it gets interesting, our appraisal of our own ability to handle the threat. And I use the pandemic as an example because I think we at the beginning, March 2020, none of us knew, well, what do we do in this situation? I remember when it was first, coming out everywhere, my wife and I were going down to the mailbox with gloves on and putting the mail in a box for 3 days before we would touch it. We were washing the bags of food that we brought home. All kinds of things that we didn't know if we needed to do because our appraisal of our own ability to handle this threat was not very good. But now we know, and I feel very confident about my abilities now because I know that if I mask up and get vaccinated, I'm probably going to be okay. So that's where my appraisal of my own ability to handle it has changed. And if you think about it, every time you attend a stress management training program, that's going to help you change your own evaluation of your ability to handle it. So that's that third definition, which we call the transactional definition. So let's move on into the body of the program. Well, before I do that, I want to share with you this little picture, which looks a lot like my cat. My cat, who is no longer with us, and I miss him a lot, looked a lot like this. Now, one day I went out into my backyard where we're sort of near the woods, and there's foxes that come through every once in a while. And when I saw him in the backyard, there was a fox, and they were kind of about 5 feet apart, both pretty much in this position, kind of doing this face-off. And of course, I was getting ready to intercede if the fox got any closer, but he didn't, and the cat kind of won the face-off. It really surprised me. Now, about a month later, I saw my cat in this exact same position, right? Exact same position. And I thought, wow, there must be a fox around. But no, there wasn't. There was a chipmunk about 10 feet away. Now, think about the difference between that. Good stress, that's kind of the difference in my mind between good stress and bad stress. In one situation, he was the prey. In the other situation, he was the predator. And yet it's that same energy going through our body. Think about the difference between excitement and anxiety. You can get so excited, you're shaking. You can also get so anxious you're shaking. So it's kind of an interesting thing. It's all about energy. Stress is about energy. And how can we process that energy in a way that's helpful to us? I used to think that professional athletes had ice water running through their veins in order to, get up, stand. Let's take a baseball player, come to the plate and stand there before 50,000 fans and get a hit. How do you even do that? And luckily, I think it was really a eye opener for me. I happened to meet the psychiatrist for the New York Mets, and he told me, no, they don't have ice water. They're as terrified as you could imagine. He said, like pitchers, he said, they always get sick before their starts, and they vomit and they do all kinds of things. And it's not that they have, and he told me, I can't prescribe them any medications for anxiety. He said, because you can't send somebody out on a field where a ball is going to pass by them, their nose at 100 miles an hour. There's nothing you can do to help them other than give them the advice to kind of transform this energy. And that's really what I think. We got a little bit away from the holidays, but I really think during the holidays, we have to take the activities that we love and allow them to process that energy in a positive way, looking at things. They could be good, they could be bad, but we need to see the good in them and focus on that. So step one is about, let me go back to that, raising awareness and connecting the dots between your symptoms of stress and your sources of stress. So symptoms of stress, everyday symptoms of stress could be rapid heartbeat, cold hands, dry mouth, perspiring when you don't expect it, and muscle tension. And by the way, this is kind of how I feel every time I put on a presentation. I always get a little stressed out. My hands before I start, a little bit cold, get a dry mouth. I've got a glass of water right here, just in case. There it is. And so these are the kinds of symptoms that we all deal with. And we learn, and I've learned how to transform those symptoms into just giving a more energetic performance. So symptoms of pandemic stress. Now, there really are no symptoms specific to the pandemic, except these are the ones that used to be uncommon and now have become more common, according to all the research I've read. The levels of anxiety, gastrointestinal issues, shaking, shivering, panic, depression, apathy, moodiness, short fuse, and insomnia are some of the different symptoms that people are feeling more and more as a result of the pandemic. So just something to keep in mind as you're trying to connect the dots between your symptoms of stress and your sources of stress. It's really just a sign that some form of adaptation is needed, that it's time to do something different. So when we think about holiday stress symptoms and causes, we can think about having too much to do and not enough time to do it, feeling overwhelmed, lacking meaning and purpose, financial stress. Those are really symptoms specific to the holiday. So if you're feeling that way, I think a lot of what we're going to be talking about in the next 20 or 30 slides or so are going to help you with these specific feelings. Of course, we've got the limitations that we experience with the pandemic. I haven't seen my 2-year-old grandniece for her entire life because she was born right before the pandemic. So family gatherings, we're going to talk about how they're not always kind of what we're hoping that they're going to be. So we have to kind of acknowledge that and take that in. And I'll show you how we can do that during the program. So the first tool I want to introduce you to is this stress number system that I developed. And it's based on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being total absence of stress or tension, kind of how you'd feel maybe after you've gotten a 60-minute massage. Or for me, it's like I like vigorous exercise, followed by, let's say, a shower or a swim in the ocean if it's summertime. And 10 would be a panic attack. So probably nobody's experiencing a panic attack right now. So what do you think your stress number is right now? Just kind of go inside and think about, well, what might it be? Typically, what I've seen is people tend to operate somewhere between a 2 and a 6 or a 7 if they're having a really stressful day. A lot of times people think, well, I'm not feeling any tension right now whatsoever, but they've never really done something to get their sort of state of tension down to a 0. So you might discover that as you calibrate this system, and it takes a few days to do it, that what felt like a 0 today was actually a 3 a week from now, when you get into a situation where you really truly are relaxed. The first time I ever experienced a 0, I had the exact same thing where I thought 3 was 0. So turns out I was doing three sets of tennis, playing against a guy I'd never beaten before, and it was just totally exhausting. After that, I took a swim in Long Island Sound, and then what followed was really interesting to me, a real eye-opener. I had a whole list of things I had to do. It was a Saturday. My wife and I were having a party, and I had all these errands to run. And every time I went on the list of errands that I had to do, they didn't have what I wanted. And that meant I had to drive across town to get the thing. Like I went to a party store, and if a party store doesn't have something that you want, where are you going to even get it? So normally, if those things had happened all in a row like that, I'd be really frustrated. But I noticed that I wasn't frustrated at all. And that's because I started my day at a 0. And let me tell you something, stress is cumulative. And because a lot of the stress chemicals that are released during a stressful episode take a while to dissipate, right? Up to 2 hours. So if you have one stressful episode followed by another, like I did that day, your stress levels tend to go up throughout the day. Now, if you start at a 3 or a 4, your stress levels are going to go to a 7 or an 8, whereas mine never really probably went above a 3 that entire day. So something to think about as you consider this stress number system. So definitely keep that in mind. So let's see. So remember what it is that gets you down to a low range, like my little story there. And also think about what makes your number spike. Is it just thinking about the new variant of the coronavirus? Well, we've got some work to do if that's the case. So here we are at step 2. Everything we're covering now is actually going to be techniques that are going to help you lower your stress number. So we carry around stress like it's almost like a boatload or a bucket load of pain. And I like this picture. It's kind of goofy, but I like this picture because to me, it's like about a person who just won't let go of their stress. You say, well, you could probably throw half of those file folders away. You don't really need them. But people, they hang on to their stress. They won't let go of it. No, yeah, that problem, I can't solve that problem. There's nothing I can do about it. And you will see this when you're talking to other people and you see the solution clearly yourself, but the other person doesn't either hear it or want to hear it. And what I really want you to notice is when you're the person who's in the picture. I like to define stress is a problem you believe you can't solve. So that's a really important thing to think about. And a lot of times we can put so many things into this basket where there really are garden variety solutions. Now, one of the techniques that I recommend in this situation is a technique I call shift your focus forward, from being problem-oriented to being solution-oriented. So for here, what we're talking about is the fact that stress usually hits us by surprise. And when it does, we're all about the problem, all like that woman in the previous slide. Now, this woman is somebody who looks like she's solution-oriented to me. She's making lists. She's thinking about, how can I solve this problem? So whenever you get into a situation where you feel like you have a problem, you believe, notice I'm almost italicizing that word with my accents, that if you believe you can't solve it, you need to move past that. And sometimes it's just the simplest way to do that is to just type the problem into Google and see what comes up. And here's the key takeaway from this slide, which is it's not finding the solution that lowers your stress, it's looking for the solution that lowers your stress. And immediately you'll notice that your creative problem solving starts to kick in, and things just start to change and shift the minute you start looking really earnestly for the solution to a problem. So in order to kind of use problem solving to address holiday stress, I think one thing we need to do is start early. Now, maybe, I think starting now, if you're somebody who puts things off to the last minute, get started now with what it is you need to prep for the holidays. Set aside 10 or 15 minutes for planning and problem solving every day. Make a list. And I like to say, make a list and check it twice, because when we make lists, that's great. but you want to prioritize those lists. And what you'll find when you do that is there'll be certain things on the list that you don't really need to do before the holidays. You can put them off until January and not worry about them now. Make a list of the 5 things you love to do at the holidays. Make another list of the 5 things that you don't like to do at the holidays, and try to do more and more from the first list and less from the second. You really don't have to send out cards. You don't have to bake cookies if you don't want to. You don't have to put up a tree if you don't want to. Whatever it is you don't want to do, sometimes you can find a way to not do it, or to get somebody else who cares about it more to do it for you. So make sure you do the things you want to do and delegate the things you don't. So that's step 2, problem solving. Now we're going to move on to cognitive restructuring, which is a really key point in my 6-step model, because this is teaching you how to manage stress on the fly while it's happening. Cognitive refers to thinking, knowing, relating to your perception. Restructuring refers to reorganizing, rebuilding, or changing. So when we put it together, we get reorganizing the way you perceive the world. A synonym for that would be reframing. I like to say changing the way you think during a stressful situation. So this little equation, which was developed by a guy named Albert Ellis, and Aaron Beck are the co-founders of cognitive behavioral therapy. Now, Ellis died maybe 5 years ago. He lived to be the age of 95. And Aaron Beck died about 3 weeks ago. And these 2 gentlemen, who one's a psychologist, the other is a psychiatrist, were the founders of cognitive behavioral therapy. And if you've ever been to a therapist, chances are they're practicing this form of therapy. So pretty amazing. Now, I met Ellis on several occasions, and he's a really interesting guy. And he came up with this equation, which is really a tool you can use to manage stress on the fly while it's happening. A stands for the activating event, or it's any source of stress. It could be a flat tire, a lost set of car keys, or burned cookies, or any not have discovering on Christmas morning you don't have a gift for somebody that is on your list that's going to show up that day. So those are all A's. B's are what you think about as a result of meeting up with this A. And C is the consequence, how you feel inside. So you might feel upset, angry, frustrated, depressed. Those are all C's. So what Ellis made clear is that there's always a lot of negative self-talk going on in our heads. And it's plain to see if we want to see it, but most of us aren't really even aware of it. It's kind of like wallpaper. It's everywhere you look, but you just tend not to see it. So Ellis used this equation to help us realize that our thinking during these stressful events can really make the stressful event a whole lot worse. So, for example, if you're stuck in traffic, you might say, "Oh, this traffic is unbelievable. I'll never get where I'm going at this rate." And of course, what happens, and what Ellis liked to point out, is a lot of this thinking is completely false. You might say, this is his favorite one, by the way, this is the worst possible thing that could have happened at the worst possible time. And we've all said that to ourselves at one point or another, and it seems harmless, but it really does add to the amount of stress you feel at sea. So what he pointed out, and by the way, he loved that one, because if that was true, if it was the worst possible thing, you wouldn't be standing there. So there's a lot of ways that you can learn to dispute the overly negative self-talk that you have at B. And hopefully we'll show you exactly what I mean right here. Now, this picture kind of represents me about 25 years ago. My wife went out and bought a bike for my son, and it was in a box in the garage. And what I didn't realize, of course, everything needs to be assembled these days, but things actually used to come assembled when 25 years ago. So when I discovered that 11 o'clock at night on Christmas Eve, that this bike wasn't assembled, I kind of freaked out. It was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to do? I'm terrible at this. I'm never going to be able to do this in time. My kid won't have his Christmas present that he really wants. So you can start to see how that self-talk at B is overly negative. And really what we're talking about at B, in order to change it, in order to change the outcome, in order to lower the amount of stress you feel at C, is pretty much just giving yourself a little pep talk. Either, hey, you've got this, you can do this. It's not going to take you forever. You can follow directions, even though you've never assembled a bike before, you can figure it out. So it sounds a little corny when I put it that way, but it really is really life-changing. In fact, when you see this quote, it's sort of a combination of effort between Stephen Covey and Viktor Frankl. This quote really sums up the power of the ABC equation. All our opportunity for personal growth, think about that, all our opportunity for personal growth lies in the small space between stimulus, that's A, and response, that's C. And that small space is B. And you can learn with this technique to tease out that space at B and just give yourself a little more time to think about what your reaction is. And if you can think about it and process it just for a little bit, it won't be a knee-jerk, stressful reaction. It'll be a thoughtful reaction that will result in a lot less stress at sea. So that's step 3. Step 4 is mindfulness. And I think, as the result of this having recently in the last few years become a buzzword, a lot of people are confused about, well, what is the value of staying in the present moment? And why do I even need to care about it? Well, I think understanding that, plus the difference between everyday mindfulness practice, which actually is all about staying in the present moment and why it's so helpful, and formal mindfulness practice, which is all about mindfulness meditation, which I think a lot of people think, oh, that's what mindfulness is about. Well, learning the difference is going to, I think, be very informative for you right now. Now, why do I have a picture of a guy in the shower? That seems strange. But there's a very good reason for that, because this is going to help teach you the point that I'm trying to make about everyday mindfulness practice. So maybe you've experienced this yourself. You've been in the shower 5, 10, 15 minutes, and at the end, your hair's wet, but you have no idea whether you shampooed it or not. Now, where were you when you were shampooing your hair? Well, in point of fact, you weren't there. You were somewhere else. Your body was there, but you were somewhere else. Now, the only moment you can ever experience is this moment right here and right now. And maybe I've got your attention now because you're thinking, yeah, I do that all the time when I'm in the shower. I think about something else. And sometimes if we go into the future, we think, what if this happened? What if that happened? And this is all stuff that usually, by the way, never comes to pass. And yet we worry about things. Now, here we are, we do this all the time, but when you do it in the shower, you're missing out on the opportunity to have a really pleasant 15 minutes. You could really be enjoying the sensations that you're feeling, but no, you're going to some stressful place in the future, or you're going back in time, holding on to something that's already happened and can't be changed. Like some argument you had with a friend. Oh, I can't believe she said that to me. And here you are in the shower where you could be thoroughly relaxing. And there's so many opportunities during the holidays to enjoy the present moment. So I want you to really watch your mind and see how it tends to wander at any point in the day, but particularly at certain pleasurable points. And this is everyday mindfulness practice. And that means being present in conversations, even just a short one that you might have with a grocery store clerk, by really listening. They say, you have two ears and one mouth for a reason. You need to listen twice as much as you speak. So when you do that, when you're conscious of that, you will bring yourself into the present moment. Noticing sense perceptions, that's a great way to bring yourself, it's like a portal to the present moment. So you can do that right now. Let's take a minute just right now to experience the present moment through sense perception. So just notice, you might want to close your eyes, just notice how your clothes feel on your body. Just notice that. How do they feel? How does the areas of your skin that are, in the air, touching the air, let's say your hands and your face, how does that feel? Is there any breeze? Is there any air circulating around your face? And then think about where your body is touching the chair. Just notice that. And just in that moment, let's say you were having a stressful moment during the holidays, just give yourself 1 minute to bring yourself back to your senses, coming back to your senses. Jon Kabat-Zinn, who's an expert on mindfulness, wrote a book called Coming to Your Senses. That's really the portal to the present moment. You can do that anytime you like. Being mindful while you're eating, savoring every bite. We're eating way too much during the holidays. You might as well enjoy it rather than eating something and thinking about something else while you're doing it. That's really multitasking, and multitasking is the opposite of mindfulness. And then finally, spending time with pets. Pets are always in the present moment because they don't have a big prefrontal cortex. And so they're just thinking, they don't think about the future. They don't think about the past. They just think about now. And when you pet a cat, like my cat, he would purr and that would bring me into the present moment too. All right, so formal mindfulness practice, we just talked about everyday mindfulness practice is meditation. And there are the forms of mindfulness meditation are as easy as pie. Breath awareness, that's just noticing every in-breath, noticing every out-breath, and noticing the gap between the out-breath and the next in-breath. Sounds complicated, but it's really simple. You're just breathing in, you notice that, breathing out, notice that. Then there's always a gap. And that's where your mind tends to wander, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Sonic meditation is just listening to the sounds in the world. So let's do that for 30 seconds. Just close your eyes if you feel comfortable, but you don't ever have to close your eyes if you don't feel comfortable. And let's just listen to the sounds in the room. What are you hearing in the room? I hear my computer humming. And what do you hear just outside the room? And what do you hear outside the building? And open your eyes, and there, we just had another little quick um, meditative moment. And you can do that for 5 minutes, you can do that for 15 minutes. One wonderful way to do that is to sit next to a stream or a brook, or at night when the rain is falling on the roof. Just listening to those sounds, very, very relaxing. Thought watching is a more sort of high level version of mindfulness meditation where you're trying to distance yourself from your thoughts. You're trying to watch them come into your head. See, the key philosophical aspect of mindfulness that we really don't have time to get into right now is that the mistake, that the thing that trips us up in life is that we think we are our thoughts. And so if you have the thought, I'm a terrible person, that can be a real bummer, a real downer. But if you can kind of distance yourself and practice this with meditative exercises like the ones I'm recommending right here, you can distance yourself from thoughts like that. And then they don't have an emotional charge to them. They just become a thought that pops like a soap bubble in the air. Pretty interesting and pretty liberating as well. So key thing to do when you're practicing mindfulness meditation is to understand that mind wandering is absolutely part of the process. It's really the practice that involves mind wandering is part of the practice. When your mind wanders, you're and then you bring it back to whatever it is you're focusing on, that's really exercising the muscle of concentration, pretty much in the same way you would be if you were doing reps at the gym, right? You're strengthening your muscles. So every time your mind wanders, don't get frustrated, don't get upset. It happens to everybody, even advanced level meditators. Their mind wanders all the time. And so you just, when it wanders, bring it back. When it wanders, bring it back. Every time you do that, you'll get a little bit better at your concentration. All right, so that's step 4. Step 5 is resilience. Now, resilience is really everything that we've been telling people for how to manage stress for decades, right? It's yoga, exercise, meditation, relaxation techniques like deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation. And yeah, those are all great. Now, the problem is when it comes time for the holidays, people think, oh, well, I like to do these things, but I really don't have time to do them now. And just when we need it most, that's when we do stress management the least. So that's a real problem that we have to overcome, especially at the holidays. So traditional stress management tends to be reactive. It's like, oh, a week from now, you're going to remember, hey, I think I'm going to try that meditation technique that Jim Porter taught me. But that's not really what I want you to do. And that's not what creating a resilience routine is all about. It's about, instead of being reactive, I want you to be proactive, because just like my story, remember my story with the vigorous exercise, the 3 sets of tennis, and the jump in Long Island Sound when it was a little bit chilly in June? All of that gave me a situation, instead of doing it reactively, like trying to prevent, trying to, deal with a bad day. It's almost like putting on a Band-Aid. Instead of doing that, I was proactive about it and I prevented myself from having stress that day. So you really can do these kinds of resilience activities and prevent a bad day from happening in the first place. And that's really dramatic and remarkable. And the research all bears this out, that people who exercise in the morning, when it's the easiest time to kind of develop a new habit, feel good all day. They feel better all day. And so create a routine that works for you and something that you can do during the holidays. Maybe your compromise is you're going to do a little shorter routine, but don't miss out on your routine. Don't let stress fool you into thinking you don't have time to do this. Now, here's a little routine that you can develop for yourself. It could involve deep breathing. Now, when I teach deep breathing, I tell people to put a hand over their belly button and notice their hand rising on the in-breath and falling on the out-breath. I usually have people breathe in through their nose and out through their partially closed mouth. So let's just do one deep breath. Put your hand over your belly, and if you want to, close your eyes and take a deep breath in. And breathe out. That's it. I bet you already you're feeling better. I know I'm feeling better. I get to do these things and they lower my stress when I'm doing these kind of programs. So progressive muscle relaxation, make a fist with each hand. There we go. I'm seeing those fists. And just clench them and bring your shoulders up to your ears. Clench your face into the tightest frown you can. And then take a deep breath in. Hold all that stress and all that tension for a count of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and let it release. And what the guy, Edmund Jacobson, who developed this approach to teaching people how to get relaxed, which back in the 1930s, what he discovered was when you deliberately tense a muscle, it's going to relax way more afterwards. So that's progressive muscle relaxation. Body scan is just starting from the top of your head, working yourself down through your body, through the classic stress points. Might be the forehead, might be the jaw, might be the shoulders, might be your upper back, lower back. Just scan for any remaining signs of tension, and then you breathe into that. So let's say you had tension in your forehead. Just close your eyes, take a deep breath in, and just notice how the air just travels up through your nose. And it kind of calms your forehead, doesn't it? Yeah, it's a really wonderful thing. So put all these things together with a mindfulness meditation at the end, and you've got yourself a nice little 5-minute resilience routine you can put in place at the beginning of every single day, or use it as a break when you come home from work and you want to start the evening fresh with your family. All right, so that's step 5. Step 6 is social support. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, I believe that social support is your most important weapon against stress. If you think about it, what do you rely on in the most difficult times of your life? Let's say you're going through a health crisis or a financial crisis, or you've just broken up with your dearly beloved, whoever that might be. Well, you rely on the help of friends, family, support groups, doctors, counselors, and the like. And all of these things are so important. Now, at the holidays, I think there's a little bit of a mixed bag with all of this, because sometimes we would rather hang out with friends. Sometimes it's really family that we want to be with. Sometimes it's some sort of combination, but part of your family don't like your friends. So it gets complicated at the holidays. And I think we just have to kind of embrace that complication. I mean, sometimes we have to do things that we don't want to do with the holidays, or maybe the thing that one person loves to do, another maybe younger person doesn't love to do. So we just have to kind of accept the fact, I've had some of the happiest times at the holidays and some of the most unhappy times at the holidays. There's just this contrast. And I think, mindfulness is all about acceptance of what's going on in the present moment. You can't be in the present moment without accepting what it delivers, right? And so just learning the ups and downs of the holidays, being okay with that is really important. Now, one thing I learned with the onset of the pandemic was that getting together with people online is almost as good as being there in person. And there's so many people that we can't be with. And, reaching out to somebody like a long lost cousin during the holidays, that's a great thing to do, because there's somebody that you really just feel like during the regular year you don't have time to. That's the time to do it. And our technology allows us to do that in a way that's very personal now. I'm just so thrilled and grateful for the fact that my daughter, who lives on the opposite coast we can get together with her in person. Really, I mean, it's virtual person, of course, but it's still seeing the look on her face and the emotions on her face. It's just so important. So who's ever important to you, make sure you reach out to them, even if it's only through technology. And finally, I want to say about social support is that you benefit not only from getting it, but you also benefit from giving it. So really notice that and be aware of that. So that pretty much finishes up my 6 steps. I see Danica has popped onto the screen. So I'm guessing that I've used up my 50 minutes. And I hope I didn't talk too long, and hope everybody enjoyed the program. I can end here. I can go a few more minutes. Danica, what are your thoughts?
Well, I wanted to, I put in the chat that if there were any questions that people could just type them in the chat. Since we have an intact group, if anyone wanted to unmic to ask a question or type a question in the chat, that would be great. This has been a great presentation, just thinking about all of the pieces that normally complicate the holiday, but you know, on top of the social distancing and other things that people are doing or need to do to stay healthy and stay safe during the holiday. I'm glad that you have given us some real tools to start practicing this afternoon. I don't have to have equipment. I don't have to have, you know, even though I have access to a relationship with a therapist, there's some things that I can do to manage and identify things that may not be serving me well in how I'm thinking or how my body is responding and can take immediate action. So if I'm gonna check the chat again to see if we have any questions there. Let's see, I know we're at the top of the hour, and I wanted to see if you could just give us a real 2 or 3 minute high level overview of what is the StressStop website. You can give the website address and so that people know what to expect when they're accessing that NAPEBT resource.
Okay, great, great. You know what? I'm going to advance a few slides because I have a slide. Where's my cursor? There we go. I have a slide that shows the that shows the homepage of this resource. We call this My Stress Tools. Every time, this is my homepage. So what you're seeing here is what you'll see for you'll have your own homepage on there. Danica's got her homepage, and everybody who signs up for this gets their own homepage. And on that homepage, you're going to navigate by clicking on this menu button, and then you're going to see, this is really just the top row of the icons that you'll see. But in this top row alone, there's a lot of activities that are involved that will support this whole 6-step process. Like, for example, in the video section, you'll be able to do things that teach you about social support. There's a series of films on emotional intelligence that we made with Dan Goldman, and there's a lot of information about social support there. There's also in the brain training section, you can learn, this is all dedicated to teaching people about cognitive restructuring, which is step 3. This is really all about problem solving, because when you start to keep track of your stress, which you can do in the journaling section, you'll start to see solutions to problems. Any problem, I always tell people, go to the journaling feature and keep track of your stress for 2 weeks. Sounds like a lot, but you really just have to make a little note of every little stressful event that happens to you. And when you do that, you'll see repetition occur, like, oh, wow, I always get stressed out in the morning. So getting ready for work. So what I need to do is get things ready the night before. Doing this leads to problem solving. So that's step 2. This is, the stress profiler is going to tell you where you are with your stress. It's going to teach you about stress symptoms. So that's taking care of step 1. So right, just in this one, just small part of the icons you'll see on the menu page, when you click on the menu button, you're going to get right to those 6 steps. So I hope everybody will access this. You'll have 24/7 access to this. And there's a lot of good material on there.
Absolutely. I've really appreciated the tour that you initially gave me of the resources, and then just my own experience watching the videos and, doing some of the activities. I think with it being available 24 hours a day, it's something that you can do, whether it's, kind of powering down at the end of the day, or to kind of get you started to play something kind of in the background as you're brushing your teeth that helps you to think about new ways to give yourself all of the benefits of um, keeping your stress low, giving yourself the best support that you can give, and then so that you can give your best to your family, your community, your coworkers, and customers. So we thank everyone so much for joining us today. James, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for sticking with us with this presentation. If you have additional questions for James, you're welcome to send an email to me to the wellness email, or just access this great website through the NAPEBT webpage, or go out to My Stress Tools, create your username and password, and head right in. Wishing everyone a happy, joyful, thoughtful, meaningful holiday time.
Thanks, everybody.